Reborn, Michael found himself at the entrance of the exclusive suite. Within, a symphony of astonished exclamations echoed, "Sarah, you're amazing. How did you manage to captivate Michael so completely, keeping him constantly by your side?" "Yes, the formidable Michael of the Sterling dynasty, trailing after you like a devoted pet. What would his reaction be if he discovered you had twins with your former sweetheart?" Sarah's reply dripped with self-satisfaction. "What does it matter if he finds out? He'll still do as I say and throw the most lavish wedding ever seen. And that's not all. He'll gift our family a dowry of 100 million, or I won't go through with it." Hearing Sarah's words, Michael couldn't suppress a rueful inward laugh. In his previous existence, he had loved Sarah unconditionally. Post-marriage, Sarah had callously disregarded his love and self-respect. She devoted all her efforts to her own small family, even diverting the Sterling family's resources to her ex-lover. Michael's discovery of this came too late. He would never forget lying in bed, his life ebbing away, while Sarah, with her family of 4, stood by, showing no concern, only scorn. "Michael, you were always just a replacement I settled for." That was when the truth hit him. He was merely a stand-in, a pitiful one at that. Now given a new lease on life, he vowed to avoid repeating his past blunders. The somber smirk on Michael's face transformed into a resolute gaze. Today, he was supposed to collect Sarah for their bridal gown appointment. Previously, Sarah had voiced her desire to be the most radiant bride in the world. Michael had invested over 10 million to engage elite bridal gown couturiers from overseas, even learning some tailoring skills himself to collaborate with the designers in crafting the world's most exquisite and unparalleled wedding dress. The gown was now finished, but she was no longer deserving of it. While Sarah remained inside, reveling in her boasts, Michael turned and departed decisively. Seated in his vehicle, his phone buzzed. "Michael, the wedding location is nearly prepared. When will you and your intended come to inspect it?" Michael was jolted back to the present. If he recalled correctly, his wedding with Sarah was just 7 days away. To keep his word to Sarah, he had reserved all the city's prominent screens, television networks, and even taxis to showcase their joyful moments. He had personally edited all the videos frame by frame. Now, the entire metropolis was aware of his deep affection for Sarah, and he had made Sarah the most envied bride. "We're calling off the wedding," Michael stated firmly. The voice on the other end immediately panicked. The wedding preparations alone had already cost Michael over 10 million. "Michael, are you serious? Do you think I'm in the mood for jokes?" The person paused, then cautiously inquired, "Do you need us to remove the wedding decorations?" "No need. I'm only canceling the wedding with Sarah. Everything else remains." After the call, Michael arranged for a substantial dowry to be sent to Sarah's family. But this time, it was not intended for Sarah. It was for her stepsister, Emily. After driving off, his phone rang once more. It was Sarah. He paused momentarily but opted to answer. "Michael, the get-together with my closest friends just wrapped up. Now I'm offering you a chance to make amends. Come and get me," she declared. In the distance, he could hear her friends' oohs and ahs. Michael didn't need to speculate. He knew Sarah's friends were praising her. "Apologies, I'm currently unavailable," Michael responded evenly. Sarah's playful chuckle followed swiftly. "Michael, you're still so immature, always attempting to catch me off guard." Michael raised an eyebrow, puzzled. "Don't assume I'm unaware that you've already dispatched the dowry to my residence. But that billion-dollar present, you must wire it to my private account. I'll forward you my banking details shortly. Oh, and it needs to be done by tomorrow. If not, I won't be pleased. If I'm displeased, there won't be a lovely bride at your ceremony." In the distance, Sarah's friends could be heard interjecting. "Wow, I truly respect you, Sarah. You truly understand how to handle a man. When will we be as skilled?" "Don't fret, there won't be a bride resembling you at my wedding," Michael stated icily. "Michael, if I'm not your bride, who else could it be? Cease these little games. I comprehend your motives. Really, is this your concept of a surprise since you didn't come to get me tonight? Michael couldn't help but roll his eyes before disconnecting the call. Back inside the house, Michael gazed at the newly adorned wedding chamber. He had personally arranged every detail, but now it appeared somewhat excessive. He began dismantling some of the embellishments. When it was time to prepare the wedding for Emily, he would ensure a fresh start. While he was in the process, thunder boomed and soon heavy rain began to cascade outside. Abruptly, the door swung open. There were rapid footsteps and Sarah's voice resonated. "Michael, what's the meaning of this? It's pouring outside, didn't you notice? Not only did you neglect to pick me up, but you didn't even bother to check on me. If you continue behaving like this, I might reconsider whether we should even proceed with our wedding." Then came the sound of objects being tossed around. Michael couldn't suppress a chuckle. "You hung up on me without my consent, and now I'm nearly being mocked by my friends. Can you please stop acting so childishly?" Seeing that Michael remained silent, Sarah marched into the room. She flung open the door and was astonished to see the wedding decorations being dismantled. Her demeanor swiftly altered. "What's happening? Why did you remove everything?" "It's nothing. I simply dislike the decorations now," Michael stated nonchalantly. "Well, at least you have some sense. I've always found the decorations gaudy. You should engage a premier wedding designer to redo it. Otherwise, when my friends witness this, I'll be mortified." A subtle smile graced her face. "I'll overlook your behavior tonight, considering your efforts." Sarah displayed a contented grin. She regarded Michael with a condescending air. Just as Michael was about to interject, her phone abruptly rang. Upon seeing the caller ID, a flicker of apprehension crossed her face. "Is it him?" Michael inquired. "That's irrelevant to you," Sarah retorted coldly. "I'm yours now. You don't need to harbor jealousy. You're aware I dislike men who are overly jealous." She continued, seemingly talking to herself, oblivious to Michael's detached and frosty demeanor. She turned to step outside to answer the call and returned a minute later. "Mark's child is unwell. He's finding it challenging to care for Lynn alone. I must go check on them." Sarah seemed to sense something was amiss and added, "Mark and I have been separated for ages. Ever since he returned from overseas, he's been tending to the kids solo, and his health isn't optimal either." "All right, I comprehend. Proceed," Michael stated, utterly disinterested. Sarah's countenance displayed displeasure. "What's with this demeanor? I believed you were someone who values children. I even envisioned having one with you. If you persist in acting like this, how can I entrust you with my offspring?" "My offspring needn't come from you," Michael responded flatly. "Michael, don't employ such language to antagonize me. Don't forget our nuptials are in 7 days. Everyone is aware our families are uniting. If I fail to appear, the Sterling family will face difficulties. I'm granting you 3 days to contemplate this. Don't seek me out in the interim." With that, she departed hastily. Michael couldn't help but raise his hand to his forehead, utterly dumbfounded. Sarah had clearly been experiencing guilt when she uttered those words, attempting to stir up some minor trouble for Michael to justify her departure to meet Mark. How had he failed to notice this previously? Now it appeared both brazen and comical. After Sarah's exit, Michael altered the password to the residence's smart lock. He also contacted the housekeeper to come and tidy up the entire chamber. 3 hours later, the entire wedding suite was completely revitalized. As for the redecoration, it had always been part of his strategy. But this time, it was intended for Emily. Once finished, Michael retrieved his phone and noticed a post from Mark on his social media. "Genuine love is when she's available whenever I require her." The post was accompanied by a video. In the video, Sarah was embodying the role of a devoted spouse, bustling around the house, attending to everything from supervising Lynn to preparing meals. She was an entirely different individual from the one Michael had encountered. Michael scoffed and silently gave it an endorsement. In his prior life, he had done everything for Sarah, enabling her to ascend to the matriarchal position of the Sterling family. He had even relinquished complete authority of the Sterling Group to her to satiate her yearning to be a formidable, self-reliant woman. But in the end, it had all been part of her scheme. She had never cherished him. Michael switched off his phone, preparing to rest. But Sarah's call came through once more. "Michael, what's the significance of this? Mark's post was merely a jest. Why did you endorse it? Mark is now burdened with guilt, incessantly apologizing, and the kids are wailing nonstop. Is this the consequence you desired? You had better extend an apology to Mark promptly, or I'll genuinely reconsider whether I desire to wed you." "I dislike petty men." Sarah's voice was strident and grating. "Furthermore, I've already consented to wed you, so cease attempting to seize my attention in this manner. It won't endear you to me. In fact, it's simply revolting. Do you comprehend?" Sarah persisted, talking incessantly. "Fine, I comprehend," Michael responded, unable to restrain himself from rolling his eyes as he endured her tirade. He raised his hand to unendorse the post, baffled by how he could have been so deluded as to wed such a woman in his prior life. Now, in retrospect, it was truly preposterous. At least in this lifetime, Michael had finally discerned whom he genuinely desired to wed. The subsequent day, Michael visited the bridal boutique to inspect wedding gowns. Once everything was finalized, he intended to have the gown delivered to Emily for a fitting. This way, any necessary alterations could be made in advance. However, as soon as he reached the establishment, he overheard voices of commendation and exhilaration. "Mark, do I appear stunning in this wedding gown? This is crafted by one of Milan's premier bridal couturiers. It just arrived in the nation, and I desired you to witness it initially." She was donning the wedding gown Michael had expended millions on, striking poses before Mark. "Wow, Mom appears so gorgeous." Before Mark could articulate a response, the two youngsters beside him erupted in jubilation. "Mom, you resemble the most exquisite bride globally in that attire." The two offspring, likely around 3 or 4 years old, distinctly resembled Sarah. In his past existence, Michael had encountered these youngsters early on, but at the time he hadn't harbored any suspicions. Reflecting now, it was all infatuation that had blinded him. Mark grinned. "Sarah, you genuinely look breathtaking. This dress appears as though it was tailor-made for you." Michael entered the store, his countenance as somber as a tempestuous sky. When the bridal boutique's manager spotted Michael, he swiftly greeted him with a grin. "Michael, welcome. Who authorized you to permit someone else to don the wedding gown?" Michael's voice was frigid. The manager's grin swiftly dissipated. She asserted the gown was intended for her from you." At that instant, the entire quartet turned their gazes towards Michael. Mark's visage flashed with trepidation. "Sarah, what do we do now?" "Don't fret, just observe me," Sarah stated, her tone brimming with assurance. She strode towards Michael, clutching her skirt in indignation. "Michael, didn't we concur that for these 3 days you wouldn't seek me out? Yet here you are, pursuing me. You truly exasperate me." Michael disregarded her and inquired, "Who granted you authorization to don this attire without my consent?" Sarah's demeanor altered as she swiftly comprehended that Michael had likely overheard something he shouldn't have. Nonetheless, she wasn't perturbed. She held the conviction that even if Michael had overheard everything, he would still endure it due to his profound affection for her. With that notion, she audaciously retorted, "What are you insinuating? Why can't I don the wedding gown you commissioned for me? Are you incensed because I donned it in Mark's presence? Can't you simply be more magnanimous and cease being so trivial?" Hearing Sarah's utterances, Michael finally grasped just how brazen and unscrupulous she was. Just now, those two youngsters addressed her as Mom, and she presumed Michael hadn't overheard. "Remove it," Michael stated icily. Kevin, who had been standing nearby, abruptly interjected. "Michael, this is all my doing. Please cease arguing. It's entirely my fault. Sarah mentioned the gown was from you, so I believed I'd assist her by offering some input." "I'll take the kids and depart immediately," Kevin stated, reaching to gather the twins. But just as he was about to depart, the two youngsters glared at Michael with fierce expressions. "You villain! Why are you tormenting Mommy and Daddy? one of them exclaimed. Indeed, you're a colossal villain, tormenting my mommy. The other youngster chimed in. Sarah and Kevin promptly rushed over to stifle the children's mouths, their eyes flickering with apprehension, but they swiftly regained their composure. Kevin's visage turned ashen as he elucidated. Michael, please don't misconstrue. Before he could conclude, Sarah interjected, So what if they addressed me as Mom? These youngsters lack a maternal figure, and they're at an age where they yearn for maternal affection. What's amiss with them addressing me as Mom? I'm a woman. It's innate for me to feel maternal tenderness, Michael. If you lack even that degree of empathy, then you genuinely need to reevaluate yourself. I don't desire to wed a frigid, callous individual. Sarah, now occupying the moral high ground, commenced critiquing Michael. Michael gazed at Sarah, utterly speechless. I instructed you to remove it. At this juncture, Michael couldn't care less about Sarah's deeds anymore. Disregard the fact that she had 2 offspring for another man. Even if she had an entire football team of youngsters with someone else, it wouldn't perturb him in the slightest. Sarah was utterly incensed. It's merely a wedding gown. I don't even value it. But heed this. If you desire me to remove it now, don't even contemplate requesting me to don it on our nuptial day. With that, Sarah stormed off towards the fitting chamber. When she emerged, she had trampled on the attire, and the lace and diamond embellishments were all contorted into a disarray. The store manager rushed forward to restrain her, but it was futile. The gown was virtually ruined. We're departing, Kevin. Sarah held one child while Kevin carried the other. Before they departed, Sarah turned back to Michael with a final menace. Michael, this time, I'm genuinely enraged. I'm going to chastise you. Ponder meticulously about what you're going to do to recompense me. And just so you're aware, if the present isn't valued at a minimum of $10 million, don't even bother appearing to see me. With that, they hastily exited. Michael didn't even glance at their receding backs. He lowered his head to gaze at the nearly obliterated wedding gown. His demeanor darkened. The bridal boutique manager swiftly apologized. Michael, we're exceedingly remorseful for this. We'll exert every effort to mend the gown. No need. An attire that someone else has donned is no longer befitting for her, Michael stated with a frigid tone. Do you still possess the invoice for the gown? Indeed, we do, the manager responded promptly, signaling for an associate to retrieve it. Michael accepted the invoice and examined it. A wedding gown valued at millions. He extracted his phone and initiated a call. Attorney? Michael, what can I do for you? I require you to initiate a lawsuit on my behalf, Michael stated succinctly. He elucidated the circumstances briefly to the attorney over the phone and requested the bridal boutique to furnish the surveillance footage depicting Sarah ruining the gown. Since Sarah had been soliciting a $10 million present, this would be the present Michael prepared for her. He anticipated it would astonish her. After attending to everything, Michael addressed the bridal boutique manager. Do you possess any alternative wedding gowns? Presently, we lack any attire in this price echelon. The manager appeared somewhat apprehensive, her mind racing. Michael's demeanor stiffened, and the manager swiftly continued. I overheard that the preeminent bridal couturier July recently unveiled a wedding gown with a publicly accessible price, albeit it's quite costly. How much? Michael inquired sharply. $3 million. The manager cautiously cited the figure. Commission it for me. I'll forward you the dimensions subsequently. Michael's tone was forthright and unambiguous. The manager was startled, but didn't dare linger. Michael, don't fret. This time we will assuredly fulfill your anticipations and ensure the gown is well maintained. Excellent. 3 days hence, the front page headline of the City A News was replete with buzz. Sterling Group's Michael nears nuptials, expends a fortune on City A's premier luxury mansion for his beloved. Milan's preeminent bridal couturier, July's masterwork stellar downpour. Procured by Michael for $30 million, us, Mr. Sterling enraged over celestial heart. Diamond ring valued at millions acquired for his paramour. For a fleeting moment, several news articles concerning Michael's extravagant fondness for his spouse proliferated wildly across the internet. Top comments. This is the tangible manifestation of the imperious CEO everyone discusses. Oh, such envy. I'm wholeheartedly endorsing Mr. Sterling. Mr. Sterling isn't merely affluent, he's also dashing and steadfast. The woman who weds him must have rescued the cosmos in her prior existence. I'm immensely envious of the woman who will become Mr. Sterling's spouse. Concurrently, on Sarah's social media, related videos commenced surfacing. In the video, she was adorned in impeccable makeup. Michael, I'll concede you possess some sincerity. I'll provisionally pardon the deeds you committed that perturbed me, she declared, her countenance brimming with conceit and appearing exceedingly lenient. As soon as the video was disseminated, it became viral. In less than an hour, it had amassed hundreds of thousands of endorsements. Top comments? Oh, so Mr. Sterling's ostentatious expenditure is merely to elicit a smile from the beauty? Lovely sister, you're extraordinary. Can you impart to us how you've ensnared Mr. Sterling so completely? I aspire to learn. I aspire to learn as well. The comments section erupted, and the video's acclaim remained sky high. Sarah was swiftly being elevated to a pedestal. She squandered no time posting a subsequent video in response. In the video, she expounded on the couple's recent altercations, meticulously omitting anything that would portray her unfavorably. As soon as it was uploaded, it instantaneously ascended the trending searches again. Oh, Mr. Sterling's domineering affection and coerced fondness. The sister is so fortunate. The manner in which affluent individuals extend apologies is truly something to covet. In his office, Michael gazed at the trending topics and comments, feeling utterly speechless. What are you awaiting? Remove it promptly. After his assistant departed, Michael's phone abruptly rang. Observing the caller ID, his demeanor shifted subtly. It was none other than Sarah. Michael hesitated momentarily before answering. On the other end, Sarah's voice was saturated with smugness. Michael, I've admonished you numerous times. You must answer my call instantaneously. Why can't you commit that to memory? Then her tone abruptly transmuted. However, this time I'm extending forgiveness. The deeds you've committed these past 3 days, I'm reasonably content with them. The presents you curated were sincere. At least they compensate for the chastisement I administered to you these past few days. Michael couldn't help but emit a faint smile. At this instant, he comprehended a maxim all too well. When an individual is excessively stimulated, they might just culminate in laughter. Continue speaking. But there's one matter I must apprise you of. When are you intending to deposit the 1 billion dowry into my account? I'm informing you the nuptials are impending. If the dowry isn't in my account prior to the wedding, I can't vouch that I'll actually materialize at the ceremony. Irrespective of how exorbitant the wedding gown you dispatch me is, it won't signify. Michael massaged his temples. It would be preferable if you don't attend. Michael, it's already this late, and you're still indulging in these ploys of playing hard to get. I'm cognizant you're endeavoring to incense me and subsequently astonish me later. I comprehend it. Your motives are transparent. You can persist in delivering surprises, but don't provoke my ire again, understood? Otherwise, if one day you genuinely exasperate me with your stratagems, I'm uncertain what I might perpetrate. I might just vanish to the extremities of the earth, and you'll never be capable of locating me. All right, Michael responded serenely, utterly detached. He lifted his hand and languidly commenced perusing his moments. Then he abruptly perceived a video disseminated by Kevin. In the video, the quartet was observing pyrotechnics, with the two youngsters nestled between the adults, their countenances radiating with felicity. Before long, Kevin and Sarah exchanged a kiss, their gazes brimming with fondness. The caption read, "There's nothing more exquisite than this instant. For her, I'll undertake anything." At that instant, Sarah's voice was still reverberating in his ears, and Michael experienced a sudden surge of revulsion. Just as the call with Sarah was concluding, she appended, "Oh, by the by, my father is hosting a familial repast tonight. I've magnanimously resolved to permit you to accompany me. But I'll remind you, don't botch things up tonight. If you comport yourself appropriately, I'll bestow upon you a legitimate designation. You'll ascend to the position of son-in-law of the Lin family." Sarah addressed Michael as if bestowing upon him a grand benefaction. Michael snapped back to reality and recollected that he was indeed slated to attend the Lin family's familial repast this evening. Nevertheless, the objective of his visit was to deliberate the particulars of his and Emily's nuptials. "You're proceeding to my family's abode. Ensure you convey some costly presents. I don't desire my family to denigrate you," Sarah appended with a hint of superciliousness. "That's superfluous for you to mention. I've already curated everything," Michael responded before promptly disconnecting the call. In the evening, Michael rode in a conveyance heading to the Lin family's dwelling. Upon arrival, the chauffeur opened the car door for him to disembark. A second vehicle followed closely behind. Several individuals soon emerged from the car, each clutching a gift. Michael stood at the forefront, attired in a bespoke Italian handcrafted suit and Spanish calfskin leather footwear. His imposing physique with broad shoulders, a slender waist, and a well-defined chest rendered him exceptionally handsome. The Lin family's attendants swiftly rushed inside to announce, "Yeah, Mr. Sterling is here. Mr. Sterling is here." A few figures materialized at the doorway, the foremost being Mr. and Mrs. Lin. They were trailed by several others, one of whom was Sarah. Today, Sarah donned a white gown but sported heavy makeup. She stood in high heels so towering they seemed to defy the laws of physics. Her posture was one of superiority, and her overall appearance felt quite incongruous. Standing beside her was another young woman. She wore a pale yellow dress and comfortable sneakers. Her hair was styled in a high ponytail, and she wore no makeup, bestowing upon her a natural and fresh allure. Her presence exuded purity and elegance. In stark contrast to Sarah, this was Emily, Sarah's stepsister. "Michael, you've arrived. I trust the journey wasn't excessively fatiguing," Mr. Lin greeted initially. Michael proffered a composed smile. His eyes briefly alighted on Emily. Sarah, completely oblivious, advanced and nudged Emily aside with a sense of superiority. With an air of haughtiness, she gazed at Michael and inquired, "Have you conveyed everything I instructed you to procure?" Michael furrowed his brow slightly upon witnessing this. Without exhibiting any reaction, he gently sidestepped Sarah and addressed Mr. Lin. "Uncle Lin, you're excessively courteous. I was in a rush, so I've only conveyed a few unassuming presents." The entourage behind him immediately advanced, proffering the gifts. Before Mr. Lin could respond, Sarah impatiently moved forward. "Permit me to inspect what you've conveyed," she stated eagerly, approaching Michael directly. "You haven't disregarded my directives, correct? If I deem your presence mortifying, I won't acknowledge you." Sarah's tone was supercilious. Just then, Michael's aide spoke up. "Mr. Sterling's presents encompass a pair of dragon and phoenix gold hair adornments valued at 10 million, a pair of blue and white porcelain urns worth several million, and a limited edition luxury automobile worth tens of millions. Besides that, there are 10 million worth of hardware and a pair of wedding bands worth $1 million. As Sarah heeded the aide's introduction, her smile grew so expansive it seemed to reach the heavens. Mr. and Mrs. Lin nodded approvingly. Sarah beamed and declared, "Michael, I'm exceedingly gratified with your presence. I hereby proclaim that you have passed." Turning to Mr. and Mrs. Lin, she proclaimed, "Dad, Mom, I'm officially declaring that Michael is now qualified to become our Lin family's son-in-law and my spouse." As soon as the words escaped her lips, she excitedly advanced, endeavoring to link her arm with Michael's. But Michael smoothly sidestepped without a sound. Mr. Lin's demeanor instantaneously darkened, his countenance hardening. "Sarah, what on earth are you perpetrating? What do you signify by proclaiming Michael your spouse?" "Dad, did I articulate something amiss?" Sarah inquired, her expression faltering slightly. "You're dreadfully mistaken. Today we're deliberating the nuptials between Michael and your sister." Mr. Lin's voice was incisive with disapprobation. Sarah was stunned in disbelief. What did you say?" Her mind was in disarray, unable to absorb the unexpected information. Mr. Lin disregarded her and shifted his attention to Michael. Michael, kindly overlook her conduct. Michael grinned subtly, then abruptly took a stride ahead. Sarah, still attempting to process what had unfolded, widened her eyes, finding it hard to fathom what she had just heard. She clung to the expectation that it was all a misunderstanding. However, as Michael proceeded past her, not bestowing upon her a single glance, he made a beeline for Emily. Sarah finally snapped back to her senses, fury simmering within her. This is preposterous. It cannot be. Michael, the person you intended to wed, was me. Why are you suddenly captivated by that young woman, Emily? She observed as Michael reached into an intricately fashioned box and extracted a pair of wedding bands valued at millions. He slipped one of the rings onto Emily's finger, and Emily, blushing, accepted the other ring and positioned it on Michael's finger. Mr. Lin, witnessing the scene, beamed broadly. Michael, Emily, come inside and be seated. Mr. Lin beckoned enthusiastically. Michael nodded and, without hesitation, clasped Emily's hand. Emily's eyes shimmered with emotion, and she didn't hesitate to grasp his hand firmly. Sarah could no longer restrain herself. In a fit of pique, she stormed over and shoved Emily aside. Emily stumbled, nearly plummeting to the ground. However, Michael, swift as a flash, reached out and steadied her. His demeanor turned frosty as he glared at Sarah. What do you deem you're executing? Michael, you're perpetrating this deliberately, aren't you? You merely desire to seize my attention and incite my jealousy, correct? Sarah's visage contorted into an odd expression. Fine, I concede it. Your scheme succeeded. I'm envious. Now you can terminate your little charade. She stared at Michael, anticipating him to thrust Emily aside and approach her, asserting her as his, relinquishing all the presents she anticipated. Yet the scene she had envisioned didn't unfold. Instead, Mr. Lin could no longer restrain himself and vociferated sternly, Enough, Sarah. Today is a jubilant occasion for your sister and Michael to deliberate their wedding arrangements. If you persist in instigating trouble, don't fault me for severing your financial assistance. Sarah froze, staggered by the unforeseen rebuke from her father, who had always been so mild with her. By the time she regained her composure, Emily had already linked arms with Michael and entered the living room. Sarah remained outside, alone, a bitter sensation of desertion engulfing her. This isn't voracious. It's a reverie. I must be hallucinating, she mumbled to herself. She raised her hand and pinched her palm. The acute pain swiftly surged through her. It hurts. No, this cannot be voracious, she whispered, still in disbelief. Inside the living room, Mr. and Mrs. Lin were conversing merrily with Michael. They had already deliberated the majority of the wedding particulars. Abruptly, Mr. Lin inquired, Michael, when will your parents be returning to the nation? Mr. Lin, my parents are already cognizant of the nuptials and are boarding the earliest flight tomorrow morning. Michael responded with a grin. Throughout the discourse, Emily comported herself like a tranquil, submissive kitten. She sat adjacent to Michael, and Michael maintained his hand firmly clasped around hers, the warmth of his hand bestowing upon her a sense of security. This sensation rendered Emily grounded, and she instinctively tightened her grip on his hand. That's splendid, Mr. Lin declared with a grin. Once you return, deliberate the specifics with your parents, and if all is satisfactory, we can establish the wedding date for 3 days hence. Sounds favorable, Michael concurred. As the discourse neared its conclusion, Mr. Lin stated, Emily, escort Michael out. Emily nodded and, intending to withdraw her hand from Michael's grasp, discovered that he had no intention of releasing it. She gazed up at him and their gazes converged. In that instant, Michael merely grinned and guided her towards the doorway. Emily's heart palpitated, and she couldn't restrain herself from experiencing the flutter of exhilaration. As they exited, approaching the conveyance, they espied Sarah standing nearby. Her eyes were rubicund, her demeanor lamentable. Michael, inform me this is all spurious, correct? It's merely a misapprehension, isn't it? Michael couldn't be troubled to respond to Sarah. He had just lifted Emily's hand. The rings they were both wearing sparkled under the light. The brilliance of the rings immediately stung Sarah's eyes and pierced her pride. "You're definitely doing this to provoke me. You want me to marry you, so you had my dad and that little girl cooperate with you in this act, right?" "I'm sorry, I don't have time for that," Michael said bluntly, showing no hint of courtesy. "And I've already told you, the person I'm marrying is Emily, not you." Michael knew that if you love someone, you should be open and honest about it. Not like in the past when he had blindly fallen for Sarah, only to be humiliated and treated like a fool, a simp, with his love and dignity trampled on. Sarah's jealous gaze shifted to Emily. "You little hussy, it's you who seduced Michael, right? Tell me, what tricks did you use to get him to marry you?" She lunged forward, intending to strike Emily. Emily's face changed slightly. "Sister, it's not like that." Just as Sarah was about to slap Emily, Michael stepped in front of her, blocking the blow. He grabbed Sarah's wrist firmly. "Enough of this." With a swift motion, he shoved Sarah aside. Sarah stumbled back, her eyes wide in disbelief. She never imagined that the man who had once been so obedient to her would actually lay a hand on her. "Emily, are you okay? Did you get scared?" Michael asked with genuine concern. Sarah's jealousy flared, her eyes turning red. Everything that was once hers had been taken by Emily. "Michael, I know this is just a game, right? You're trying to make me jealous because you love me, right?" Patricia continued, unwilling to accept the situation. Michael completely ignored her and, taking Emily's hand, walked toward the car. Like a gentleman, he opened the car door for Emily. "Tonight, you should come to my place. You can try on your wedding dress tomorrow and see if it fits." Michael had seen the jealousy and hatred in Sarah's eyes earlier. With her temper, he couldn't be sure she wouldn't do something rash, so it was safer to keep Emily close. Emily's cheeks flushed slightly. "Okay, I'll follow your arrangements." Once they were in the car, the convoy quickly drove away. Sarah stood there, disheveled, her carefully applied makeup ruined. Just as she was about to lose herself in despair, a voice suddenly cut through the air. "Mommy! Mommy?" The clear voices of two children instantly brought Sarah back to reality. Sarah's expression immediately shifted to panic. She looked up to see Kevin walking toward her, holding the hands of two children. She quickly walked toward him. "What are you doing here?" Kevin smiled. "The kids miss you. They've been asking to see you, and since you haven't replied to my calls or messages, I came to find you." "Mommy, is this Grandpa's house? I really want to go inside and see Grandpa and Grandma." The two children spoke in unison. "Eli, Allie, Grandpa, and Grandma aren't home today. Let's come back another day," Sarah said, giving Kevin a meaningful glance as she composed herself. She wanted him to quickly take the kids and leave. But just as she was about to walk away, the two children suddenly asked, "Mommy, do you think that person inside is Grandpa?" Sarah turned her head and looked at the person who had just walked out of the house. It was her father. Fiona immediately panicked, urging Kevin to quickly get the two children into the car. Only when they were safely away from Lynn's house did she finally let out a sigh of relief. "Mom, what's wrong? Are you okay?" one of the children named Eli asked. "I'm fine." Sarah tried to act calm, but her unease was evident. Lynn's family was strict, and if Lynn's father found out that she had had twins out of wedlock, it would be a scandal. He would definitely disown her. She had her position in the Lynn group now, and her main source of income came from them. Both the children and Kevin depended on that income. If her financial support was cut off, she would truly be left to fend for herself. Kevin noticed Sarah's distracted state and couldn't help but ask, "Sarah, what's wrong? What happened today?" "I told you I'm fine. Didn't you hear me?" Sarah snapped irritably. Kevin was taken aback, feeling a pang in his heart. In his memories, Sarah had always been gentle with him, never raising her voice. This sudden outburst left him feeling uneasy. But as a man being kept by her, he couldn't afford to anger her further. He just bit his tongue, staying silent. Back home, Sarah resumed her dutiful wife and mother persona, bathing the children. Seeing her like this reassured Kevin. This scene felt warm to him. After taking a video, he quickly edited it and posted it with a caption bragging, "Sarah, having you around is the greatest comfort for me and the kids." Just as the post went live, Sarah stormed over to him, her face filled with anger. "Delete it." "Sarah, what's wrong? Why should I delete it? Everything was fine." Sarah snatched the phone from his hands and deleted the post without a second thought. "From now on, you're not allowed to post things like that. I won't allow you to provoke Michael." Kevin was a little taken aback. "What happened? Did you have a fight with Michael?" "Michael, he's going to marry another woman," Sarah said, her voice low and despondent. Hearing this, Kevin's heart couldn't help but leap with joy. His patience had finally paid off. He immediately soothed her. "Sarah, if he's marrying another woman, it's because he's blind and doesn't know your worth. But it doesn't matter. Without him, you, me, and Eli and Allie will be able to live openly." "Shut up!" Before he could finish, Sarah interrupted him angrily. "What do you know? Michael loves me. He loves me deeply. This is all just a game he's playing. Everyone in the capital knows that Michael is my loyal servant. Who else could he possibly love besides me? When we were at our house earlier, he was definitely acting to make me angry. Do you believe me? If I call him right now, he'll come running back to see me. And not only that, but he'll kneel in front of me and beg for my forgiveness." Kevin's optimism was instantly extinguished, like a bucket of cold water. Sarah, however, didn't seem to notice. She picked up her phone and was about to call Michael. Even though the call hadn't gone through yet, she could already vividly imagine Michael on his knees in front of her, begging for mercy. The thought made her secretly excited. At that moment, there was a knock at the door. Sarah's heart leapt. It must be Michael coming to find me. She put down her phone and opened the door. "Hello, I'm Michael's lawyer. I've been asked to deliver this legal notice to you on his behalf. If you don't want to be sued, please compensate for the damaged wedding dress worth $30 million as soon as possible," the lawyer's letter read. "Otherwise, we'll see you in court." Sarah's face instantly changed. She had thought it was Michael coming to apologize, but instead, she had received a legal notice. Meanwhile, in the largest bridal shop in the capital, the store manager wore a flattering smile. "Michael, the wedding dress Starry Rain song, designed by Master July, has been airshipped here." "Good, let her try it on," Michael said indifferently. The manager was struck speechless by Emily's beauty the moment he saw her. Emily had a tall figure, fair skin, and a delicate face, even without any makeup. Her demeanor was polite and graceful, in stark contrast to the other women who had come to try on wedding dresses. No wonder Michael had chosen her as his bride. The manager quietly praised her in his heart. Emily glanced back at Michael. "Shall I go?" Her eyes sparkled with a playful and cute expression. In fact, Emily and Michael had known each other for more than 10 years. Their relationship wasn't as unfamiliar as one might think. It's just that they hadn't interacted much in their daily lives, and the change in their relationship now was something Emily was still adjusting to. However, one thing was certain. Emily was willing to marry Michael. This secret had always been hidden in her heart, unknown to anyone else. Michael watched Emily walk away, a faint smile playing on his lips. In truth, there was another reason why he had chosen Emily. In his previous life, the last thing he saw before he died was a tear from Emily's eye. At the time, it felt inexplicable. So, after his rebirth, he immediately investigated this sister. Sure enough. As Michael was lost in his thoughts, his phone rang. It was Sarah calling. Without a second thought, he pressed the hang up button. Then the phone bombarded with calls. Michael was getting frustrated, so he simply blocked her number. "Michael, your bride is here." The bridal shop manager's voice broke his thoughts. Michael looked up and his pupils involuntarily widened. Emily stood before him in a pure white wedding dress adorned with diamonds, shimmering brilliantly. The dress was minimalist in design, but on Emily, it exuded an almost sacred aura. Emily's shoulders were slightly exposed, elegant yet modest. Her bare face showed a subtle flush, making her beauty utterly mesmerizing. Michael couldn't help but stare, a little dazed. Emily blushed slightly. "Michael, does this wedding dress suit me?" Michael quickly nodded. "It suits you perfectly." Emily, flustered by the compliment, felt a little shy. Before they left, Michael instructed the store staff, "Our wedding is in 3 days. Make sure to take good care of the dress." The store manager immediately nodded. After the previous incident, she was determined not to be careless. "Don't worry, Michael. There won't be any issues this time." Michael took an umbrella and led Emily out of the store. Noticing that Emily seemed a little stiff, Michael couldn't help but say, "Emily, we're about to become husband and wife. You don't need to be so reserved around me." Emily glanced at the man known as the rich and powerful Michael. Her eyes flickered slightly, and then she suddenly asked, "Michael, why do you want to marry me?" Michael was slightly taken aback. He hadn't expected Emily to ask this question so quickly. After recovering, he smiled mischievously and looked at Emily. "Then why did you agree to marry me?" Emily felt a bit embarrassed. "You were the one who proposed first. You answer my question first." Emily was serious now. Seeing how serious Emily was, Michael stopped his teasing and said, "Do you remember more than 10 years ago, on a day just like today, when a little boy fell into a pool and a little girl saved him?" As soon as the words left his mouth, Emily's eyes widened. "I know about that, but—" She paused for a few seconds. "When you fell into the pool and woke up, you said it was my sister who saved you. I didn't know the truth back then, but now I do. The one who saved me was you, wasn't it?" For all these years, Michael had believed it was Sarah who had saved him, and that's why he had been so obedient to her. He had almost drowned, and in his moment of despair, he had seen a little girl with a bamboo pole pulling him out of the water. He had passed out before he could see her face clearly, and afterward, Sarah had claimed credit for it. Over the years, it was because of the life-saving grace that Michael had been so compliant with her. He never expected that Sarah had been using him all along and that he would die with regret in his previous life. Emily nodded. "It was me." "Why didn't you tell me back then?" "If I had known, I wouldn't have wasted so much time," Michael suddenly said. Emily replied, "I actually wanted to tell you, but when I realized I liked you, you were already my sister's boyfriend, S. Oh, I couldn't bring myself to say anything." Michael suddenly smiled. "You liked me? When did this happen?" Emily's face turned red. Uh, well, the two of them chatted along the way, and the awkwardness between them seemed to fade away. Emily felt much more at ease now. When they returned to the residence, they freshened up and then slept in separate rooms. That night, Emily had sweet dreams. The next morning, as soon as Michael woke up, his phone rang. He answered the call. "Michael, quick, check out what's happening on a certain video app. Something's gone wrong." The call was from Michael's close friend, Alex. Michael frowned as he listened to Alex's words. He knew Sarah wouldn't let this go easily. Without any hesitation, he opened the app to check, and sure enough, a trending topic popped up. Breaking, Michael abandoned Sarah, deliberately created a deep affection persona. Michael clicked on the post. In the first video, Sarah, heavily made up and impeccably dressed, appeared with red eyes as she cried and vented. "Everyone, I've been betrayed by my own sister. Michael promised to marry me, but then he turned around and married my sister. They've been secretly together all along." She sobbed dramatically. In the video, she spun a web of lies and distortions. How could someone who loved me so much suddenly change his heart? Now I understand. Men always get tired of the old and seek the new. Sarah's video today was completely different from the one where she had been boasting a few days ago. The comments quickly flooded in. "So disgusting. How could a sister steal her older sister's boyfriend? Is she even human? I used to think Michael was a loyal man, but now it looks like he's just a scumbag. Sisters, we must speak up for our sister. Hash girls help girls, Exactly. From now on, we will never buy anything from Sterling Group. Let them go bankrupt and their stock prices crash. And we must expose that third party. I want to see what kind of person steals her own sister's boyfriend. The comment section quickly became a war zone. Michael's face darkened as he read through the comments. His fists clenched, and his eyes flashed with cold fury. After a moment, he called his assistant. Get this trending topic taken down. Then he called Alex. I need you to investigate something for me. Also, look into a guy named Kevin. Alex answered confidently. Don't worry, investigating people is my specialty. I'll get on it right away. Meanwhile, Emily had just walked out of her room. Her phone was ringing nonstop. As soon as she answered, a barrage of insults erupted from the other end as though she had been doxxed. Michael saw this and said to Emily, Turn off your phone for now. I'll handle this. Sarah had crossed a line with Michael, and this time, he wasn't planning to let her off so easily. Okay. Emily naturally trusted Michael without question. After quickly gathering a few things, Michael headed out. As he was leaving, Emily called out to him. Be careful. I will, Michael replied with a light smile. Once outside, he dialed Sarah's number. Her voice came through the phone. Finally, you're willing to call me. Where are you? Let's talk. What do you think? I'm at our home. Home? Sarah chuckled. You bought that multi-million-dollar wedding house for us, right? Well, I'm right here in our wedding house. Michael's face darkened at her words. I'll be there soon. After hanging up, Sarah smiled smugly. Suddenly, a voice echoed from the room. Sarah, you really know how to work your magic. Looks like Michael called you all on his own. Does it surprise you? Michael is a total simp when it comes to Sarah. He can't resist her. Sarah smiled even more at the flattery. This time, she was sure she had him wrapped around her finger. Of course. He's doing all this just to make me jealous. All I have to do is play my cards right, and he'll come crawling back to apologize. Wow, Sarah, you're amazing. Her two friends looked on in admiration. Sarah laughed. Just wait. You'll see me in action. Michael arrived at the location. The multi-million-dollar wedding house he had bought was practically ready to move in. Everything had been prepared, just waiting for the wedding day when he and Emily would live there together. But what he didn't expect was for Sarah to show up there. Emily, the rightful owner of the house, hadn't even moved in yet. So what right did Sarah have to be there? Michael drove up, noticing that the door was ajar, with signs of forced entry on the lock. As he entered, he immediately sensed a fragrance in the air. Michael frowned slightly. At that moment, a voice came from within. Michael, you're really lucky, getting Sarah to cook for you. It's so enviable. This is the first time Sarah has ever cooked for another man. The two women speaking were Sarah's close friends. When Sarah heard the noise, she walked out of the kitchen, wearing an apron and looking every bit the perfect wife. Just a second ago, she'd been busy cooking. The table was already set with several dishes. She looked at Michael with a hostess-like smile. Michael, have a seat. The food will be ready soon. What are you up to now? Michael said bluntly, without holding back. Sarah wasn't offended by his tone. Instead, she smiled even more sweetly. Michael, didn't you always say you wanted to try the food I made for you? Well, I've made it, so come and taste it. Michael had, in fact, imagined a future where Sarah would cook for him after they got married. He had dreamt of her cooking for him and how happy and fulfilled that would make him. But in reality, it had always been Michael cooking for her. No matter what she asked for, Michael would always go out of his way to fulfill her wishes. He had done all this to prove his love for her, even making sure the whole capital knew how deeply he loved Sarah. But now all of that was over. Michael glanced at the dishes on the table. Every single one was garnished with green onions. He frowned. You know I'm allergic to green onions, don't you? If you don't want them, I can pick them out for you, Sarah hurriedly said. The two friends immediately chimed in. Michael, don't be so picky. Sarah is offering you a way out. Just take it. Who doesn't know how much you love Sarah? You're so lucky, man. You won't find a woman as beautiful and virtuous as her anywhere else." The two women continued their chatter, completely oblivious to the fact that Michael's expression had darkened, becoming as stormy as a brewing tempest. His jaw tightened, and the air around him seemed to crackle with suppressed anger. "Did I ask for your input?" Michael's voice was low and laced with a menace that sent shivers down their spines. The sudden shift in his tone was like a whiplash. In the past, Michael had often been in Sarah's company and had interacted amicably with her friends. They had, mistakenly, believed themselves to be on equal footing with him, presuming they could dictate his actions or offer unsolicited advice. Their familiarity had bred a sense of entitlement, leading them to believe they held some sway over him. But they were profoundly mistaken. They had never been, nor would they ever be, on the same level as Michael Sterling. Now, for the first time, they truly felt the weight of his presence, the palpable pressure of being in the company of someone far above them in status, wealth, and power. Their faces drained of color, turning ashen. The confident smiles they had worn moments ago vanished, replaced by expressions of fear and uncertainty. They were suddenly rendered speechless, their tongues seemingly tied, unable to utter a single word. The air in the room thickened, heavy with unspoken tension. Sarah, momentarily stunned, froze like a deer caught in headlights. The chopsticks she held clattered to the table, the sound echoing loudly in the sudden silence. Then, with a dramatic flourish fueled by a potent cocktail of anger and wounded pride, she slammed her own chopsticks down, the sharp crack reverberating through the room. "Michael, enough with this charade. Stop pretending to be so mighty in front of me. I came here today to offer you forgiveness," she declared, her voice dripping with a self-righteousness that bordered on delusional. "I promise you, if you publicly announce that you're marrying me in 3 days, I'll remove the video," she continued, her voice hardening with a steely determination that belied the desperation simmering beneath the surface. "Furthermore, retract that lawyer's letter and transfer $50 million to my account to appease me. Then, and only then, will I pretend this entire debacle never occurred. From this moment forward, I shall be your wife, Michael." She fixed her gaze on him, her eyes burning with a fierce intensity, filled with a certainty that seemed to defy the reality of the situation. She truly believed she held all the cards, that Michael would, as always, bend to her will. When Michael remained silent, his face an impassive mask, she softened her tone, attempting a more conciliatory approach, though her words still reeked of manipulation. "Michael, I truly do harbor affection for you. I didn't desire to escalate matters to this extent. However, if you commit to marrying me, I'll relinquish the $100 million dowry. But, in exchange, you must grant me a portion of the shares in Sterling Group." She paused, drawing a breath before delivering what she clearly considered her most persuasive argument. "Furthermore, I'll curtail my involvement in assisting Kevin with the care of his offspring and bestow upon you a child of our own. You're aware of the arduous journey a woman endures, carrying a child for 10 months. I'm willing to shoulder that burden for you. You should acknowledge the depth of my sincerity." Her words hung in the air, a blatant attempt to guilt him into submission, to leverage the idea of a child as a bargaining chip. Listening to her preposterous demands and manipulative pronouncements, Michael couldn't suppress a cold, mirthless laugh that escaped his lips. It was a laugh devoid of humor, filled instead with a profound sense of disillusionment and contempt. "I have no need for you to bear me a child. My purpose in coming here today was not to engage in negotiations with you. My intention was to deliver a clear and concise message. This residence belongs to me. If you fail to vacate the premises immediately, I shall contact law enforcement and report you for trespassing. You'll be facing a period of incarceration, a few days behind bars, to contemplate your actions. As for the legal notice, I shall not retract it unless you reimburse the funds owed to me. If you refuse, I shall pursue legal recourse, and we shall meet in court." He emphasized each word, his voice devoid of any warmth or compromise. Sarah's two friends, who had been silent until now, visibly paled. They exchanged uneasy, furtive glances, Their earlier bravado completely evaporated. They sensed the shift in the power dynamic, the palpable threat in Michael's words. "Sarah, if there's nothing further, we should take our leave," one of them stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. "Indeed, I have a prior engagement I must attend to," the other added quickly, her voice equally shaky. They were desperate to escape the escalating tension, to distance themselves from Sarah's rapidly unraveling situation. Without waiting for a response from Sarah, they practically scurried out of the room, their hasty exit a clear indication of their desire to avoid any further involvement. Once they were gone, Sarah felt the full weight of her humiliation. She had orchestrated this entire scene, intending to regain some semblance of control and dignity in front of her friends, to demonstrate her supposed power over Michael. Instead, she had achieved the opposite, embarrassing herself even further and exposing the hollowness of her claims. "Michael, you're pushing this too far," she snapped, her voice cracking with a mixture of anger and desperation. Then, with a renewed surge of misplaced confidence, she added, "I don't believe you'll actually summon law enforcement. I'll disclose a little secret to you. I possess numerous methods to deal with you." The video I disseminated earlier was merely a cautionary gesture. "I have even more incriminating information prepared, ready to be unleashed." Her threat, meant to intimidate, fell flat. Michael merely responded with a cold, dismissive sneer. "Release your so-called incriminating information." "I'm not intimidated. You have precisely 3 seconds to vacate the premises. Otherwise, you'll remain. And regarding the lawsuit, if you remain unconvinced, we shall resolve this matter in a court of law. 3. He began the countdown, his voice unwavering, his gaze fixed on Sarah. 2. His tone was implacable, leaving no room for doubt about his seriousness. Sarah was visibly shocked by Michael's icy response. The man who had once been so subservient, so eager to please her every whim, had transformed into someone unrecognizable, someone issuing commands and threats. "How dare you, Michael?" Sarah retorted, her voice rising in pitch, a desperate attempt to maintain some semblance of control. 1. As Michael reached the final count, he calmly retrieved his phone and dialed the police, his actions deliberate and unhurried. Sarah's expression froze, her eyes widening in a mixture of disbelief and panic. "Wait, just wait, Michael. I'll demonstrate the consequences of your actions," she spat out, her voice laced with venom. She stormed out of the multi-million-dollar mansion that had, in her mind, once belonged to her, her exit fueled by a burning rage. As she crossed the threshold, she turned back, her face contorted with fury, and yelled, "Michael, I will make you implore me to return. You will regret this." Her words echoed in the empty space, a hollow threat that held no power over him. Not long after, her phone buzzed with an incoming call. It was Kevin. She answered, her frustration barely contained. Kevin's voice, sounding anxious and weary, came through the line. "Sarah, the children are inconsolable. They've expressed their longing for you." Hearing Kevin's voice only served to amplify Sarah's irritation. "You're incapable of even managing 2 children, and yet you expect me to be impressed? What utility do you possess?" "Sarah, what's afflicting you? You never used to address me in such a manner." "Did I articulate something erroneous? You're a grown man who doesn't generate income or support the family. You can't even tend to 2 children. Are you utterly inept?" Sarah berated him, her voice dripping with scorn. Kevin's face flushed, alternating between shades of pale and crimson, his embarrassment palpable. He felt deeply aggrieved, his heart heavy with a sense of injustice. On the other end of the phone, Sarah could hear the 2 children's voices, their cries piercing and plaintive. "Mom, we yearn for you. When will you return?" The sound of the children's sobs suddenly sparked an idea in Sarah's twisted mind. She had just conceived a plan, a ruthless scheme to deal with Michael, to make him pay for his defiance. "Michael, if you exhibit no compassion, don't fault me for being merciless," Sarah muttered to herself, her thoughts dark and vengeful. She softened her tone, attempting to sound reassuring as she replied to Kevin. I'll be home presently, just await my arrival. Kevin's heart, momentarily lifted by her words, fluttered with a flicker of hope, thinking that perhaps Sarah still harbored some affection for him and the family. Around noon, Michael had the new house meticulously cleaned once more, ensuring every trace of Sarah's unwelcome presence was eradicated. He then contacted the property management, expressing his dissatisfaction with the breach of security. The property management, deeply embarrassed by the incident, issued a profuse apology and offered assurances that such an occurrence would never happen again. Michael, not wanting to waste any more time on the matter, accepted their apology and moved on. Alex, true to his word, had already gathered the requested information and arranged a meeting. Half an hour later, Michael sat across from Alex, his trusted friend and confidant. Michael, I'm genuinely elated to witness your awakening. It's not belated at all. Alex remarked with a sincere, heartfelt smile. Michael couldn't help but feel a surge of emotion, a deep appreciation for Alex's unwavering support. As Michael's closest confidant, Alex had attempted to counsel him numerous times in the past. He had cautioned Michael that Sarah was not a virtuous person, that someone who genuinely loved him wouldn't subject him to public humiliation. Back then, Michael had been too deeply entangled in the situation, blinded by his infatuation to perceive the truth. When he had transferred the assets of Sterling Group to Sarah's name, Alex had vehemently argued with him, even threatening to sever their friendship if Michael didn't heed his advice. But nothing had deterred Michael from pursuing his ill-fated path. In his previous life, Michael had committed one blunder after another, culminating in a tragic demise. Now, seeing Alex, Michael felt a profound sense of gratitude and nostalgia for his steadfast friend. "Thank you, Alex," Michael expressed, his voice filled with genuine emotion. Alex was momentarily taken aback, then a smirk played on his lips. "Get out of here. What's with the formality? Assisting you with this trifling matter is inconsequential. The information's on the tablet. Peruse it." Alex casually tossed an iPad across the table. Michael chuckled and retrieved the device. His words of gratitude weren't solely for this particular favor. He was also expressing his appreciation for Alex's guidance and unwavering friendship in his past life, for always trying to steer him in the right direction, even when Michael had stubbornly refused to listen. "What are you anticipating?" "Open it. The intel inside will astound you," Alex declared with a mischievous grin. A sly glint flickered in Michael's eyes. The truth was, Michael had already pieced together a significant portion of the puzzle. He unlocked the iPad and navigated to the files, which contained several video recordings. The videos depicted Kevin spending quality time with Sarah and the two children, capturing their intimate family moments. There were numerous clips where the two children unambiguously addressed Sarah as mom and Kevin as dad. The footage wasn't limited to recent events. It also included older recordings, establishing a pattern of behavior that stretched back in time. "Have you been conducting surveillance on me all this while?" Michael inquired, a hint of curiosity in his voice. Alex, sensing a potential misunderstanding, quickly interjected, his tone defensive. "Michael, don't misconstrue my intentions. I merely desired to prevent you from being deceived or exploited, so I initiated an investigation into these matters." "Well executed," Michael interrupted, his voice firm and appreciative. Alex froze for a split second, caught off guard by Michael's words. The anxious expression that had momentarily clouded his face instantly vanished, replaced by relief. "I anticipated you'd be incensed with me," Alex confessed, a sheepish grin spreading across his face. "I should be expressing my gratitude, not harboring resentment," Michael responded, his tone sincere. Alex suddenly adopted a more serious demeanor. "By the way, there are also some medical records from the hospital, documenting Sarah giving birth, as well as videos of Kevin accompanying her. You should scrutinize them meticulously." "Impressive work, Alex. You managed to procure all of this?" Michael remarked, genuinely impressed by his friend's resourcefulness. Alex chuckled, a hint of pride in his voice. "When you entrust me with a task, I approach it with utmost diligence." After Michael finished reviewing the materials, a cold, determined smile emerged on his face. He carefully placed the documents aside. Alex, sensing Michael's resolve, spoke up. "Michael, entrust this to me. I possess the necessary connections. The instant you authorize it, I'll disseminate this information and completely overturn everything Sarah has propagated online. I'll expose her for the fraud she is." "I'll have to rely on you for this," Michael acknowledged, his tone formal. "Don't be so formal. We're brothers," Alex retorted, dismissing the formality with a wave of his hand. The two friends engaged in further conversation, catching up on various matters, and then Michael glanced at the time. "Alex, when I solemnize my marriage, you'll be my best man." "Without a doubt," Alex readily agreed, his voice filled with enthusiasm. After their brief exchange, they parted ways. Michael checked the time again, realizing that his parents were on the verge of arriving at the capital's airport. He planned to bring Emily along to welcome them. When Emily learned of this, she felt a touch of embarrassment, a slight nervousness about meeting her future in-laws. Michael, sensing her apprehension, smiled and teased. "Even an unattractive bride must eventually meet her in-laws, and besides, my intended is exceptionally beautiful." Emily couldn't help but giggle at Michael's playful teasing, her nervousness easing slightly. Before heading to the airport, Emily thoughtfully purchased flowers and gifts for Michael's parents, demonstrating her consideration and respect. The couple then proceeded towards the airport together. Meanwhile, another video online began to gain traction, rapidly ascending the trending charts. Sarah once again took center stage on a short video platform, this time appearing tearful and distraught, holding the two children close to her. She claimed that Michael had abandoned his wife and children, painting herself as the victim of his callous disregard. The two children, seemingly coached, played their part perfectly, continuously calling out to Michael as Dad throughout the video. "Michael, don't you desire us any longer? Are you genuinely going to forsake us in this manner?" "Daddy?" The children cried out, their voices choked with sobs, tears streaming down their faces, creating a heart-wrenching scene designed to manipulate public opinion. The comments section exploded, a torrent of outrage and condemnation directed at Michael. "Goodness gracious, I didn't anticipate Michael to be such a reprobate. He abandoned his offspring prior to matrimony, and now he's cavorting with another woman. This is utterly unacceptable. We must advocate for our sister. I propose we orchestrate a collective to proceed to the Sterling Group and demand justice for Sarah. Who's situated in the capital? Let's organize. I'm the inaugural signatory." The comments swiftly garnered over 100,000 endorsements, a testament to the video's emotional impact. "I'm participating. I'm devoid of classes in the afternoon. I'm attending." Individuals commenced to rally together, a virtual mob forming, fueled by Sarah's carefully crafted narrative. The entire Sterling Group was in a state of upheaval, the company's reputation under siege. Meanwhile, Sarah, the mastermind behind this orchestrated drama, observed the unfolding chaos with a sense of perverse satisfaction. As anticipated, by the afternoon, a sizable crowd had amassed outside the Sterling Group's headquarters, brandishing placards and vociferously chanting, "Michael, scoundrel, emerge! Michael, scoundrel, reveal yourself!" Numerous media outlets had arrived at the scene, eager to capture the unfolding spectacle. Sarah, disguised and concealed behind the crowd, watched the commotion unfold, a smug, self-satisfied smile spreading across her face. "Michael, let's observe how you're going to navigate this predicament," she muttered to herself, reveling in her perceived victory. She recorded a video of the protest and dispatched it to Michael, accompanied by a voice message. "I forewarned you I'd make you rue your actions." At that moment, Michael was at the airport, awaiting his parents' arrival. Sarah wasn't the sole individual sending him this video. Alex and the assistant from Sterling Group also forwarded it, keeping him informed of the escalating situation. When Michael viewed the video, his brows furrowed, a mixture of annoyance and determination hardening his features. Alex, in his accompanying message, was visibly furious. "This harlot is truly something. Exploiting the youngsters in such a manner, she possesses no humanity." Michael issued the directive, Merely utter the word, and I'll ensure this harlot atones for her transgressions." Hearing Alex's irate tone, Michael responded calmly, his voice betraying no hint of panic. "Initiate action." Alex, on the other end of the line, immediately became exhilarated. "You can rely on me, Michael. I'll ensure this harlot implores for clemency." A slight, knowing smile curled on Michael's lips. Emily, noticing the subtle shift in his expression, observed the smile but remained perplexed about the underlying cause. "It's inconsequential," Michael reassured her with a grin, sensing her unspoken question. Emily suddenly looked up and saw two familiar figures approaching them. "Michael, isn't that your mother and father?" The two well-dressed, middle-aged figures were indeed walking towards them, their faces radiating warmth and anticipation. "Indeed, that's my mother and father," Michael confirmed, a genuine smile replacing the earlier one. Emily felt a renewed wave of nervousness, taking a deep, calming breath. At that moment, Michael gently took her hand in his, a simple gesture that instantly eased her anxiety. She glanced at Michael, her eyes flickering with a mixture of gratitude and affection. The two of them exchanged a knowing smile and walked forward to greet his parents. "Greetings, Uncle and Aunt," Emily said with a radiant, respectful smile, extending the flowers and gifts she had thoughtfully prepared. Michael's parents, who had met Emily previously, responded with warm, welcoming smiles. "Emily, we're on the verge of becoming a family. There's no necessity for such formality," his mother said with a gentle smile, her eyes filled with affection. His father added, "Precisely, your aunt is correct." Both of them smiled, clearly delighted with their future daughter-in-law. Emily nodded politely, her cheeks flushing slightly. "I comprehend, Aunt." At that moment, Michael playfully interjected, "Mom, Dad, now that you possess a daughter-in-law, you're no longer going to be concerned about your son." His parents had been engrossed in their interaction with Emily, and Michael couldn't resist teasing them, a lighthearted attempt to deflect some of the attention. His father chuckled heartily. "You're envious of your own spouse now? Let's proceed home." "Indeed, let's proceed home," his mother concurred, eager to return to the comfort of their residence. The four of them headed home together, a picture of familial harmony. Meanwhile, as Alex began releasing some carefully selected documents online, strategically exposing Sarah's lies and manipulations, public opinion began to shift, slowly but surely. Alex, leveraging his extensive network and wealth, directly contacted a major influencer, a prominent figure with a massive online following and a reputation for exposing the truth. This influencer, known for their investigative journalism and commitment to uncovering deceit, agreed to take on the case, seeing it as an opportunity to expose a carefully constructed web of lies. Soon, the truth about Sarah's fabricated narrative began to unravel, exposed to the harsh light of public scrutiny. The carefully curated image she had presented online, that of a wronged and abandoned woman, was shattered, revealing a manipulative and deceitful individual underneath. The revelations were explosive, detailing Sarah's long-standing relationship with Kevin, the true paternity of the children, and her systematic attempts to exploit Michael for financial gain. The evidence was irrefutable, including hospital records documenting the children's births, videos of Sarah and Kevin acting as a couple long before Michael's betrayal, and financial records showing the transfer of funds from Michael to Sarah and, subsequently, to Kevin. Even her underwear, as Alex had so colorfully put it, was laid bare, meaning every sordid detail of her deceitful life was exposed. People who had initially rallied to Sarah's defense, swayed by her carefully crafted sob story, flocked to her social media accounts not to offer support, but to hurl insults and express their disgust. The tide had turned completely. "I divined it. You exude the aura of someone harboring malicious intent. How dare you defame Michael? So, it was you who pilfered a man, conceiving offspring prior to matrimony. You're not a virtuous woman at all. You're bringing disgrace upon all women. Fortuitously, I didn't endorse you previously. You are abhorrent." The comments continued to flood in, a relentless torrent of condemnation, each one a verbal blow to Sarah's already crumbling reputation. On the back end, the individuals attacking Sarah were no less numerous. The digital mob had turned on its former darling, fueled by a sense of betrayal and outrage. The group that had been protesting outside Sterling Group, initially so vocal and passionate in their support for Sarah, suddenly felt utterly mortified, the ground beneath their feet shifting. They realized they had been duped, manipulated into becoming pawns in Sarah's twisted game. One by one, they dispersed, abandoning their signs and fleeing in disgrace, their righteous indignation replaced by shame and embarrassment. Meanwhile, Sarah had become the target of relentless online scorn, a pariah in the digital world. Her social media accounts, once flooded with praise and admiration, were now overflowing with hate and vitriol. Alex, observing the unfolding chaos with a sense of satisfaction, reveled in the effectiveness of his strategy. He had successfully orchestrated the dismantling of Sarah's fabricated narrative, turning public opinion against her with surgical precision. After reporting the outcome to Michael, he wore a satisfied smile, the look of a man who had accomplished his mission. "Michael, this time you genuinely owe me a substantial favor." "Undoubtedly. I'll introduce you to a bridesmaid when the auspicious moment arrives," Michael replied, a hint of amusement in his voice. "It's a pact," Alex agreed, readily accepting the playful offer. As they chatted, Michael received a call from Emily's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Lynn, who extended their heartfelt apologies to him. They had never imagined that their daughter Sarah could be capable of such disgraceful behavior. Not only had she been involved with another man, but she had also had children out of wedlock. A fact that shocked and deeply disappointed them. Such a daughter was no longer welcome in the Lynn family, they declared. They publicly announced, in a statement released to the newspapers, that they were severing all ties with Sarah, effectively disowning her. From that moment forward, Sarah had no connection whatsoever to the Lynn family, and she was summarily expelled from Lynn Group, her position and privileges revoked. Meanwhile, Sarah had been holed up at home for the past several days, consumed by fear and paranoia, too terrified to venture outside. The online backlash had been brutal, and she feared facing the public's wrath in person. Kevin, along with the two children, was living in a state of constant anxiety, their lives upended by Sarah's actions. One day, Kevin, driven to the brink of desperation, finally confronted Sarah. "Sarah, to avoid dragging the children down with you any further, it's most prudent if you vacate my residence," he stated, his voice trembling with a mixture of anger and resignation. Sarah's eyes widened in shock and disbelief. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. "What did you just articulate? Your residence? I procured this house for you with my own funds. This is my house," she retorted, her voice rising in pitch. Kevin, emboldened by his desperation, couldn't hold back any longer. "Observe yourself now. You're nothing but a deranged woman. Who would desire someone like you? And the house is registered under my name, so depart." He stood his ground, his voice firm despite the tremor in his hands. "I envisioned you would provide for me and the offspring indefinitely, considering you bore me 2 children and were the scion of Lynn Group. However, now that you've been expelled, you're valueless. Do you comprehend?" Sarah felt as if her mind was spinning, her head buzzing with a cacophony of emotions. She stared at Kevin, her eyes wide with disbelief, struggling to process his words. "What did you just utter?" she repeated, her voice barely a whisper. "I stated you're an aged, ineffectual woman, a lunatic, and now you possess no merit," Kevin reiterated coldly, his voice devoid of any affection or respect. At that, Sarah seemed to completely lose her grip on reality. She lunged at Kevin, slapping and scratching at him with a ferocity fueled by years of pent-up resentment and frustration. "How dare you utter such words? You consume my sustenance, imbibe my beverages, and now you dare address me in such a manner? I'll combat you." The two of them quickly became entangled in a vicious, chaotic struggle, a whirlwind of flailing limbs and angry shouts. The 2 children stood by, their eyes wide with terror, crying inconsolably at the sight of their parents fighting. In the midst of the chaos, Kevin, desperate to defend himself, kicked Sarah to the ground. She let out a shrill, piercing scream, the sound echoing through the apartment. "You harlot, you merit demise!" Kevin roared, his eyes bloodshot, his face contorted with rage. He marched towards her, his intentions menacing, and grabbed her roughly by the neck, his grip tightening. In a desperate, panicked act of self-preservation, Sarah grabbed a pair of scissors that lay nearby and plunged them directly into Kevin's neck. Blood splattered, staining Sarah's face a gruesome crimson. Sarah screamed in terror, immediately releasing the scissors, her hands trembling uncontrollably. But Kevin's pupils dilated, his lifeblood gushing uncontrollably from the gaping wound in his neck. Sarah froze, completely horrified by the gruesome reality of what she had just done. She had no idea what to do next, her mind reeling in shock and disbelief. In a daze, she muttered, "What do I do now? What do I do?" Mom is malevolent. She slew Dad. Malevolent Mom. Hearing this, Sarah's pupils turned bloodshot. The children's words, though innocent, triggered something within her, pushing her already fragile mental state over the edge. "You're labeling me as malevolent?" she shouted, her voice trembling with a mixture of anger and despair. "You all label me thusly." Her face flushed crimson with fury, and she began laughing, a deranged, unsettling sound that echoed through the apartment. "You deem me malevolent? I birthed you, I nurtured you, and now you dare to label me malevolent." She grabbed a lighter from the table, her movements erratic and unpredictable. With a flick of her wrist, she ignited the flame. Locking the door, trapping them all inside, she then set the sofa ablaze. As the flames grew larger, consuming the furniture and spreading rapidly, the entire room quickly became engulfed in a raging inferno. The two children cried out in desperation, their screams piercing the roar of the fire, but Sarah continued to laugh manically, her mind lost in a vortex of madness. Soon, the fire consumed everything, swallowing the family whole, extinguishing their lives in a tragic, horrifying blaze. By the time someone noticed the smoke and flames and called the fire department, it was far too late. The entire family of 4 had perished, their lives tragically cut short, leaving this world together in a final, devastating act. When Michael received the news of the horrific incident, his reaction was surprisingly muted. He didn't express shock, grief, or even satisfaction. To him, this was merely a form of karmic retribution, a tragic but inevitable consequence of Sarah's actions and choices. At this momentous juncture, his wedding with Emily was on the verge of commencing. As the iconic strains of the wedding march filled the air, he gently took Emily's hand from Mr. Lin, her father, and together they walked towards a future brimming with hope and happiness, a future free from the shadows of the past. As they walked, arm in arm, down the aisle, bathed in the soft glow of the lights, they looked at each other. When the officiant asked, "Beautiful bride, do you take this groom to be your husband?" "I do," Emily answered firmly and clearly. "And groom, do you take this beautiful bride to be your wife?" Michael gazed into Emily's eyes. He answered with conviction, "I do. I will love her for the rest of my life."